welcome to the second meeting of the Feeding Willow to Livestock group. This session is sort of focusing on planting and establishing and sort of maintenance involved in planting a willow system that could be fed to livestock. We've got two fantastic speakers, and so I guess, sorry, before check my notes, Laura's mentioned it already, but sessions being recorded, and the idea of that is that we can then distribute the show to everyone in the network, and also put it up on IF as a designated IF website, place on the Innovative Farmers website, where we can store this and sort of signpost people if they're interested in willow, feeding willow to livestock, those sorts of things. So that's the intention. But I guess some sort of snippets. We held the agroforestry show in September. Some of you might have come along. Basically now it's taken a while, but we've now got session audio. So
to put into the plug. I think there's one in the cupboard in the corner of the dining room. The session audio has now been recorded and uploaded, and so if you visit the agroforestry show website, you can hear all the sessions, including the session on sheep nutrition. I can't remember the title, but perhaps Nigel can help.
Feeding trees to sheep. You can't see the wall for the trees, or something like that. It was.
There you go. So, but loads more as well. Some fantastic resources on there if you're interested in agroforestry, trees, farming in general. Then anyone that's going to Oxford, I think that we've got a session on fertilizers in the landscape, which is looking at it features willow heavily, but other trees as well, and whether we can, through wood chip production, look at incorporating sort of a source of nitrogen in farming systems. So that anyone there, then hopefully you'll see me talking about it, hopefully making some sense. I think that's it at the moment. The plan is to let Steve present, and then maybe a couple of questions, and then I think in the interlude, Nigel's just going to talk about the Innovative Farmers trial, just a quick shout out, a minute or so, I think, and then Oliver's going to talk about his farm and the willow and sheep that he's got there as well. So keep it as sort of free as possible. Make sure have any questions, write them down, and we'll sort of we'll be able to ask hopefully the speakers afterwards, and then sort of after that I look forward to answering this discussion and answering any questions. So Steve, if you want to try and share, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi everyone, my name's Steve Pickup. I'm not a farmer, so my experience and knowledge on livestock and everything to do with animals is very limited, but I grow trees and I specialise in growing willow, so I'm mainly going to talk about growing willow, different ways of growing willow, different types of willow. Feel free to ask any questions. First of all, when you're planting willow, you have to make a choice between planting cuttings and planting bare root. Most trees you would plant bare root, that's how they are available, whereas willow you can plant from cuttings. Now cutting can be anything from a few inches long, 1 year material, a few millimeters wide, a few inches long, up to anything up to 3 meters, 4 meters, 5 meters, as thick as your arm, almost like an instant tree. All of those will root, which is fantastic. It's essentially planting sticks. You take a stick from a parent plant and you make a hole in the ground with a metal bar and plonk it in, and essentially it's as simple as that. However, there are some do's and don'ts, but I just mentioned the bare root again. Now it is a bit counterintuitive planting a stick as opposed to planting something with a root system that's being grown in a nursery with the idea of planting out. The problem with that is when you plant any kind of bare root plant, you will get some disturbance of the roots, you'll get some damage of the roots, no matter how careful you are, and it will be set back. So it'll be weeks or possibly months before the plant recovers and then finally gets going and gets growing. Whereas when you plant a willow cutting, even in the winter, as long as it's not freezing weather, then the roots will start to grow straight away. So by the time if you plant in, let's say, December, by the time you get to March, that willow will already have established a good root system and be able to get going. There'll be no setback and it will simply romp away. Just check my notes. It's always best to plant in situ. What I don't recommend is planting in a pot and then planting out. That's just a waste of time. It's using compost. It's an extra process that's not necessary. You can plant willow virtually anywhere. It will grow in all types of soil. It will grow in waterlogged conditions. It will grow on compacted soil. It will grow on the tops of mountains. It will grow on sea cliffs. It will grow on polluted soil. So it's ideal for planting in odd places on the farm or on your holding where it's not much good for growing anything else. Having said that, if you plant it on the most fertile site or you give it lots of fertilizer, then they will obviously respond to that and you'll get far better growth. But they will grow virtually anywhere, providing you have enough sunlight. Sunlight, partial shade is okay. Heavily shaded sites, such as beneath the canopy of large trees, are not recommended. It's not really a woodland plant, it's more of a pioneer plant used to growing out in open areas. Having said all that, the most important factor for good establishment is weed control. So a willow cutting grown in poor soil with very good weed control is likely to establish and grow far better than a willow cutting planted in a very fertile site or with lots of fertilizer but with no weed control. So I'd say that is the single most important factor for good establishment and rapid growth in the first season. There are different ways of controlling weeds. Obviously, herbicide is one option, though I suspect a lot of people, or for obvious reasons, a lot of people don't prefer not to use herbicide. I've been using plastic weed membrane for a number of years. It's very effective, but personally, I don't really like plastic. So I'm going to be experimenting with wood chip, something like a bucket or a couple of buckets around each plant. I think I'll share some slides now, if you don't mind, so you've got an idea. So hopefully I'm pressing the right button. Share content. Can someone give me some tips here?
Yeah, so if you press the share button, you should be able to find.
Doesn't seem to be active for some reason.
It's Laura there. Let me.
Presenter mode, does that?
Yeah, that would work.
Which one? I've got.
Sorry, I am here. I just
Okay.
I don't think it's working very well. You are a presenter, so it should be working.
Can you see your screen with your pictures on, Steve?
I can see what everyone else is seeing. I've got like a gallery view of various people.
Right.
Let me just have a look in here. Right, I've got my screen up that I want to share. Can anyone else see that?
No, not yet.
No, so if you click on the share button, sorry again,
Right, just bear with me a moment.
You then have the option of screen or window. Do you see those two
Headings.
Hold on,
headings?
I've lost you. Here I am. Yeah, I've got.
If you click on screen, then you should share your screen and then go back to your photos and we should be able to see them.
Right, I've clicked screen.
Okay.
Oh, hold on. No, that's not.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah, now go to your photos. Click on your photos. That's it. We can see.
Ah, brilliant.
Great.
Excellent. Well done.
The wonders of technology. Can you see two screens? I can see two of my pictures.
Yeah, if you, yeah.
Which one is the correct one?
Either Max, yeah, that's fine. That's great.
That's fine?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, yeah. So this is, we tend to grow willow in what we call a copse system, which is 100 plants roughly, 1 square meter per plant. So a meter between plants and a meter between rows. We found that that's about the right amount of space, whether you want to grow the willow on a 1-year rotation, that's coppicing every year, or up to a 5-year rotation if you want to produce firewood. That gives you enough flexibility that you can change the use of your willow at any time, and you've always got the right spacing. Now these ones are pollards. There is a question of should I grow willows or should I grow pollards? We recommend pollards, and all of our new planting is all pollards now. And there are several advantages of pollards. One of them being that you can raise the harvesting height, so it's a lot more convenient for the harvester. Harvesting at ground level can be quite backbreaking if you've got quite a few hundred or more plants to harvest at any given time. Also, as in the picture, you can see we've got 2-foot-long rabbit spirals on these, so those willows are completely protected from rabbits without any rabbit netting. If you want to plant the willow in a field where you've got sheep grazing, for example, all you need to do is grow higher pollards above sheep grazing height. And I suspect some of you on here will know a lot more about how high sheep can graze than I do. Down in Somerset Levels, for example, you get a lot of willow pollards, and they have trunks about 8 foot tall and then a crown on top, and that's obviously for to raise a crown above cattle grazing height. So I'll just go to the next picture. So here, I'll just mention here in the foreground, well, here in the background, this is the first year's growth. So if you can see my mouse, you can see the stems there, and so you can get up to 12-foot growth in the first year with good weed control. And as you can see here, we've got 1/2 meter wide strips of plastic, which is a very effective weed control. Without that weed control, you might have 1 foot or 2 foot growth in a whole year. So it does make a very, very big difference. In the foreground, what you do is you keep the stems clean in the growing season, so you stop any shoots growing out from the side. You leave 2 or 3 shoots at the top, and you allow those to grow, and those will eventually form the crown. This is a close-up of the first season's maintenance. You just cut the new shoots as close to the original cutting as you can, and this is roughly what they look like. These are established, semi-established pollards. Early in the season, this photograph would have been taken about May time. So you've got about 1 foot, 18 inches of growth on that crown. You can see how the crown has developed. So you've got more than just 2 or 3 shoots that you had in the first year. You've probably got a dozen or a couple of dozen shoots there in total. And here you've got a nice clean stem. Not so much weed control going on here. but the willows are established well enough to be able to cope. However, even when they're established, we do recommend mowing between the rows. You don't have to do that every week, but if you do it several times a year, it keeps noxious weeds like nettles, brambles, docks, keeps those at bay, and keeps the willow plantation nice and accessible for when you want to go in, maybe harvest some willow to feed to your animals or do a bit of maintenance, etc. These are the same pollards as the previous slide. So again, this is 1 year's growth. So instead of 2 or 3, you've probably got about a dozen or so rods there. Some of those are quite long. They'll be about 12 to 15 foot long. One particularly good year, we had willow. The longest rods we had were 19 foot 3 inches in 1 year, and several of those on each plant. And as you can see, the plants are quite close together. So that is a lot of sticks in a small amount of space. This is a short willow pollard. These you can see after harvesting. This was harvested at 2-3 year old willow. So you can harvest at 1 year old if you want to feed your willow to your animals, or you can harvest at 2-3 year old, or you can let them grow on to about 5 year old, as in this picture. And as you can see, those stems are about 3 to 4 inches thick and perfect for turning into firewood logs. Another good use would be spiling stakes for riverbank bioengineering type work. It's a fairly high value crop. You could in theory grow the willow for a multiple of uses. So you could cherry pick a few stems on your willow pollard to feed to the animals each year, and that will allow the thicker, more vigorous stems to grow on, which eventually becomes your firewood or spiling stakes or whatever you want to grow. I can't see anyone. Can I just check that people are still there?
Yeah, we're still here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
listening.
I'm just talking at pictures on a screen. So
it's really interesting, Steve. I'm just firing questions into the chat for you.
all right, I can't see the chat at the moment, but
Right, we'll go through them at the end. That's fine. We'll go through all the chat questions and the Q&A at the end.
yeah. Okay, sure. So the thing about growing willow, if you want to grow willow to feed to your livestock, you can have a copse or a plantation which is dedicated solely for that purpose, or you can grow willow for other purposes. I've just mentioned firewood. Another purpose is windbreak or shelter belt, which was they make very good windbreaks and shelter belts. This is 2.5 years old. So it was planted from 1 foot cuttings through a 1/2 meter wide weed mat. It grew 1 year. It was cut back after the first year to encourage more bushy growth. It grew a second year. And then this is halfway through the third year. So 2.5 growing seasons. This is what your willow windbreak will look like. So very fast growing, very high yielding. Again, planted from cuttings. You don't need to bother with bare root plants, anything like that. Once you've got your own stock of willow, then you can harvest the willow and plant it yourself as often as you like. So you've basically got a free nursery stock for planting more willows on the farm. This is that Ragman's farm where I run the willow bank, and this is a willow windbreak around the orchard. In the front here, you can see the apple trees aren't quite in leaf yet. In the background, you can see some deciduous woodland. Again, not in leaf. So one of the advantages of willow, it has a longer growing season. Basically starts growing 2 to 4 weeks before other deciduous trees, and it continues well into November, 2 to 4 weeks beyond most of the deciduous trees. So a longer growing season, that is a contributing factor to the fast growth and high yields. This is a close-up of willow windbreak in the winter. So catkins are very, very good for bees and other pollinating insects when there's very, very little else available for them. It builds up, it's a good habitat. Willow was planted traditionally around orchards and market gardens for that very purpose. Attract your pollinating insects, so when your vegetables and your fruit require the insects for pollination, you've already got a well-established population of those insects ready to move on to onto your crops. Oh, here's a little video of I think there's a bumblebee and some honeybees, possibly some other insects feeding on the willow. Again, early in the spring before anything else is leafing. And as you can see, there are lots of catkins on just those few stems. Just skip to the next one. Again, after the willow catkin's gone to seed. So although if you're going to grow willow yourself, it's better to plant willow from cuttings. In the wild, willow often propagates itself by seed. So in the springtime, when there's lots of dandelion fluff blowing around on the wind, a lot of the time it isn't actually dandelion fluff, it's willow fluff. This is what it looks like on the catkin before it's dispersed by the wind. And so very good for rewilding. If you've got willow growing on odd spots, if you've got odd spots on your farm or holding that are not being intensively farmed, where the spaces for other plants to colonize, then willow as a pioneer plant, it's very good at doing that. And this is one of the techniques by which it will achieve that. And here is a close-up of some willow growing. So even just a small space, other than animal fodder, you've got your own nursery stock for planting more willow. You've also got sticks, a lot of sticks. Now, sticks can be very useful in a lot of different ways. You know, from firewood to sticks for simple building to spiling stakes for bioengineering, so on and so on. So I think that's all the slides. I'll just have a quick glance at my notes. I'll just end on benefits of growing willow on your holding to the environment. There are so many benefits. Willow being very fast growing and high yielding, it captures a lot of carbon, so that's a very obvious benefit. Being a pioneer plant, it builds the soil through leaf litter. It has a very fibrous root system, so it breaks up the soil, creates channels in the soil for water to penetrate, which means you get less runoff, potentially less flooding. Pollinators and insects I've mentioned, huge biodiversity. Those insects feed animals, birds and fish, and animals higher up the food chain. And as I just mentioned, willow's been growing quite extensively for flood control. You basically plant it in upland areas where it creates channels in the soil that allows water to penetrate. It also slows down the runoff of water, so you get less runoff and less flooding further downstream. And one other thing, filtration. You can a lot of farms. I'm just going to go back to this slide here, and that could be a filtration site. See on the hillside to the right there. You could have lots of runoff, lots of nutrients running off there, and getting into the stream or the river is probably down here. Willow is very, very good at intercepting nutrients, turning those nutrients, which would be pollutants in the river, into willow biomass, which can feed to your animals, and it's got all kinds of other uses as well. So I think that's probably as much as I'm going to say now. If anyone's got any questions, I'm quite happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Steve. That's brilliant. If I hand over to Oliver, oh no, sorry, Nigel, do you want to say just a word or two about? Let me help you out, Steve.
That's what we got there. Right, so yes, just quickly, we've got the potential trial work coming on. If anybody's not signed up their intent or interest with doing the trial work, which was going to be looking at recording the feeding of willow to lambs, looking at effect on growth rates, then please contact Laura as soon as possible. We'll be trying to get the sort of potential trial work finalised probably next month. If you want to talk about what we're potentially doing, contact me, but sign up. Laura's doing the admin on it, so there's that to do. Apologies later on when we get to Q&A. I'm going to have to run fairly sharpish in a bit because I've got to teach at 2 and walk halfway across campus. So
Great, thank you. Steve, could you stop sharing your screen? So where you shared before, the share button next to the leave button, if you just press that, it should say stop sharing.
Yeah.
And then, hand over to Oliver, who's going to talk us through what he's doing with willow on his farm. Thanks, Oliver.
Great, thanks very much. Do you hear me okay?
Yep. Yeah, great.
Grand. I will see if I can share my pics now. Okay, are you getting that?
Yep, we're getting that. Brilliant.
Okay. Thanks very much for that conversation, for that presentation. That was really interesting. I was quite jealous actually of some of the techniques there. I think I would have liked to try some of the pollarding, but we didn't try that at all. Let me just give you a brief overview. I'm a farmer here in Shropshire. I'm also doing a little bit of work with the Soil Association on establishing an agroforestry network in North Wales. So I'm sort of on the Wales-Shropshire border. So yes, I'm sort of quite involved in carbon research and in sort of transitioning our sheep holding here on the borders towards a more sort of diverse agroforestry system. And yeah, so a lot of my motivation for coppice and willow in particular comes a bit more from the carbon angle, but I'm really excited to see the potential for it with feeding to livestock, and I haven't really experimented much with that, at least not much intentionally, but I guess we'll come on to that. So if I just show you a very brief overview of what our agroforestry setup is. It's a 7-acre field, part of our holding, and it previously was just some nice permanent pasture, sheep pasture. And this winter, so a year ago, we as a sort of family decided to do something extra with it and to see what else we could do with that land. And we have done a quite diverse and complex sort of agroforestry setup where we're trying lots of different things all at once. And the main reason for that is we just really wanted to test out some things that might work, and to complexify, I guess, the field, and to try and understand, compare it to the baseline. So compare it to what was there before and measure a whole lot of things as we go along. Just very briefly, the things that we're trying to compare against the baseline are the productivity of the field, so like the food that's produced from it and fiber, the carbon impact, how that changes from just sheep to like a diverse agroforestry, the biodiversity change. So we've done quite a lot of biodiversity measurements as a baseline, and we're going to see how they change. And then also like profitability. So how much, does this make any extra money or does it lose money, and how's that impacted by it? So what we've done is we've planted a bit of an arable rotation. The colourful circles are trees, so those are fruit trees. And at the north side of the field, there's some blocks of pretty intensively planted coppice. And it's a mix of willow and poplar. And the trees which are growing in between those blocks of coppice are timber trees. So they're a mix of sweet chestnut and Prunus avium cherry trees, and we're hoping to grow them for like a quality timber crop. So they'll be harvested in, you know, several years' time. And this is an example of an alley coppice. So it's kind of like coppice with standards, but rather than having the standards in the middle of the coppice, they're sort of in lines in between it. So we're hoping to sort of maximize the space there. And then sheep are all the way around it. So everything that's not got a colorful box has got sheep. So we're keeping them. So if I go to the next, yeah, so that's the beginning of the process of planting last year. That's the field at the top corner there, the north side of the field, and it's gently sloping downhill next to a mature woodland, and that's where we're putting the 4 blocks. It's kind of loamy soil, quite neutral, quite nice soil. It's not a waterlogged spot. So this is us putting the fences up in March. So in the spring, we left it quite late. We did a lot of the work on the other bits first, and we left the coppice till a bit later. Debatable as to whether that was a good thing or not, but that was the advice that we got. So yeah, that's putting it in the lines of trees, and you can see those green tree guards. That's where we've got the timber trees growing, and those are mega mesh tree guards, which aren't too bad for sheep as long as they're done right. We ploughed the ground before we planted the willow into it. I just thought I'd show you a video of this because it's so satisfying seeing the little plough working. And we did a mixture of, we planted an understory of like woodland flowers, basically from Cotswold seeds. We got a mixture of a ley with lots of flowers in it, and that was planted in between where we put the willow sets and poplar. So next slide, please. Okay, so that's it after it's been ploughed, and you can see we left the spaces for the timber trees and the permanent pasture, and that's where we're going to put the willow. I couldn't help but put a picture of my cute little boy there. So this is the delivery of the willow, which came from Energy Crop Consultancy. I don't know if you've come across them, but they're a very much a commercial enterprise, which is selling usually much larger quantities. They kind of did us a deal and said they were interested in learning a bit more about agroforestry, so they were willing to do, you know, such small spots as this, but they came out and delivered their, you know, optimized for a commercial setting for biomass, basically. So you can see there's a mix of poplars and willow there. I would have liked to have a lot more variety of willow, but we only got 2 varieties of willow from Sweden, I believe, and I've still not got the name of them. He did tell me when we were there, but I haven't got it written down, so I can't tell you what variety they are, but I think they're a sort of invernales willow. And we cut them up into these foot-long slices. They were frozen, or they were stored in cold storage when we got them. So we planted them quite late in the spring, but they were stored dormant, and they were just, you can see that one's got a bit of frost on it. So they were just sort of defrosting, and we got them in the ground as soon as we could, so they didn't dry out. That's a bunch of the sticks cut into the lengths. So then we had a slightly unusual way of putting them in the ground. We actually found that the easiest thing to do was to use a cordless drill with like an auger bit on it. So we were actually drilling the holes for these willow sets to go in, you know, and they were planted at the spacings which we were recommended by by the guy Neil from Energy Crop Consultancy, which is slightly closer than what Steve was planting. So they're 50 centimeters next to each other in the rows. And then there's 2 rows that are 75 centimeters apart. And then there's a 1.5 meter gap between those 2 rows. So I'm happy to go over that later rather than going on about it now. But the idea is that they can be harvested with a header if you wanted to. So you can bring one of those adapted maize headers onto the field and it will just run through it. And I think that's the standard spacings. So 50 centimeters between the rows, sorry, 75 centimeters between the rows, and then a gap in between where the tires run. And then, yeah, we knocked them in and firmed up the ground around it. So that was a technique to get them in the ground. And there was about 2,500 of these sets that we planted. So quite a lot. It took a few days, but it seemed like a quick way of doing it. Then we mulched over it. So this was something that Steve wanted to learn more about. And yeah, we found, well, we ordered a lot of willow mulch wood chip from the same people from the Energy Crop Consultancy. So they were also able to supply us with a lot of this wood chip mulch, and we spread this over the land and then broadcast our seeds for the understory inside it. It took quite a bit of work, maybe 3 days, and we had a forward loader to sort of transport the mulch all around. But in the end, it did do a pretty good job. And this is only like 2 weeks or something after the planting, and you can see, you know, it's such a lovely sight when they started sprouting up and just around the wood chip there. This is a bit later, and well, what we found was after we disturbed the ground from ploughing it, we had a huge fat hen bloom. So like that Chenopodium plant, it just was obviously like a really prevalent seed in the seed bank, and just as soon as we brought it to the surface, it just dominated. But I think I'm not too worried because I don't think it will compete with the grass in the next year, because it's, you know, it's only there when there's a disturbance, I think, of the soil, and the wood chip around the willows seem to keep it back pretty well. Now, fencing. Obviously, there were sheep around here, and we decided that we wanted to have access to the ends of these coppice sections so that we could get in and out for machinery and stuff. So we wanted to use an electric fence. And the short answer is that it really didn't keep our sheep out. We've never used this before with sheep, and it just didn't do the job. And the main thing that seemed to happen is that the Welsh mountain sheep that we've got are pretty small, and they just went underneath it and between it, and then their wool just got stuck on the wires and then insulated it, and then they were happy as Larry. They were just sort of jumping in and out the whole time, and it took us a little while to realize what they were doing, and by which time they had decimated some of our willow. They'd really enjoyed it. They loved it, actually. So then we put a wire mesh back up. So we enclosed them all, and that's kept them out because, yeah, we really didn't have any work with the electric fence. So then at the end of the season, yeah, we had some damage from the sheep. These are an example of like 1 year's growth. So it's not as impressive as Steve's 1 year growth. Be interested to know why. I think it's to do with the sheep getting in and nibbling it too early. But they've come up pretty well. We're applying a bit more mulch so that the grass doesn't compete next year. And yeah, you can see some of the sheep damage there. And I've also realized in the winter that we have rabbit damage. So I'm going to be putting a rabbit net fence exclude them all the way around the end before the spring, which will be good for the rest of the field anyway, I think. So yeah, that is that. Very briefly, I will just tell you about another bit of willow coppice that we've got on the land that we established about 6-7 years ago, which is now doing really well. It's really productive. These are after being harvested, so these are 2-year-old Viminalis willow, planted much wider. You can see the sort of the biomass there in those poles. And we've chipped it straight away, and we're going to use that chip for mulch for planting. We've got a lot of hedgerow planting and fruit tree planting this year, and that wood chip is just gold. And finally, I'll just show you the process of cutting down that plot. And there we are. So yeah, I think that's it. Very happy to answer a few questions, rattle through it a bit really, but yeah, I would say I was very encouraged by establishing a new coppice, but there are some gaps in it. I would definitely use different fencing, and I think probably wouldn't plough it next time because it's brought up a whole new set of weeds that weren't prevalent in the sward. So I think I would just mulch on top of the grass and let that be. But I wanted to sort of bring in some flowers and some nice biodiversity under it, but I don't think that was a good idea in the end. So yeah, I'm keen to do a bit more of the feeding of the willow to the sheep, but I haven't really experimented in that. I'd like to maybe silage it or wrap it, bale it when it's green, so like cut it in the summer with all the leaves on, and then wrap it in silage and feed it over the winter. But I'd be interested if anybody's got any experience on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oliver. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Oliver. That's great. So if anyone has any questions,